What if you were on a track team? It was you and your buddy, a very small track team, just two of you. I grew up in Southwest Iowa. We had small teams. But let's say that two of you are your entire track team. And let's say that both of you ran the mile, which would be a stupid assumption. Both of you, the only two on the team running the same event. Well, let's just assume that for a second. Let's say that you and your buddy run the exact same times. Over and over and over again, you both run the same. You run the same mile in the same amount of time, but you each have different strategies, right? Let's say that you're pretty good at starting out really fast and just completely blowing everybody away, and then you kind of taper off at the end. Obviously, we all only have an allotted amount of energy, right? So, you start out fast, taper off on the end. Let's say that your friend, your teammate, does the opposite, starts out slow, and then just absolutely sprints at the end. Both of you are good runners. Both of you are great runners, but there's another team that's looking at you guys and kind of assessing how good you are. Would it be a flaw if that other team looked at you and said, wow, this team, they're absolutely phenomenal at the beginning. They sprint right out the gate. And then also on the back end, they sprint. I mean, the team is phenomenal because they sprint through the entire race. That would be a flaw, right? It's like double dipping, assuming that both those attributes are one person, which would be, like a 3-minute mile, which is impossible. This product does not exist. Now, why do I bring up this analogy? Because this is what is happening when it comes to the illustration war with Index Universal Life Insurance. And let me explain, and then I'll clarify this analogy here. So, prior to AG 49, Actuarial Guideline 49, which would have begun, I want to say around 2015, going off memory here, around 2015. Prior to AG 49, for the most part, certainly relative to today, indexed universal life insurance policies had one primary strategy. And this is a generalization. Yes, there were many more, but relative to today, there was one primary strategy. And that was what I will call just a basic S&P 500 strategy, right? And that is, okay, Mrs. Client, would you like a 12% cap in this product? That's the S&P 500 strategy. There may be a fixed strategy as well. Actually, probably a couple S&P 500 strategies, maybe one with a spread or participation rate or what have you. But a common design was, prior to AG 49, was say like a 12% cap. S&P 500 goes up 12, you get 12. S&P 500 goes down 20, you get 0, minus cost of insurance charges and all that. Maybe there were products out there, and there were products out there that had like 10% caps, 11% caps. There were products with 14% caps technically, right? But let's just say that 12% is the main example that we're going to use today. Now, prior to AG 49, the question is okay, what do I illustrate this product at? What do I illustrate this product at? Because we need to assume how the market, it's not going to do 12% every year. It's not going to do 10% every year. What do I illustrate it at? The answer to that question was whatever the hell you wanted to prior to AG 49. Well, thus, then came around AG 49 that said, you cannot illustrate this at 10%, that at 8% or 9%, whatever. You can't do that. We need to apply guide rails to how illustrations are created. And by the way, I remember prior to 2015, the big argument was, hey, these carriers all have similar ingredients to make the product. So shouldn't this product be illustrated at the same illustrated rate as this product? My answer to that question was no. This product's going to give a better interest credit, more than likely, than this product is. It doesn't mean that's a better product, because you also have the other side of the ledger, which is expenses and all that other stuff. But my logic has always been, and still is this product's going to provide a better credit than that product. But then how it all washes out after expenses, well, that's determined by the illustration, right? What AG 49 said was basically something very similar to kind of what I have said. AG 49 said, okay, here are the new guidelines, the actuarial guidelines. And it is, you take whatever the cap is on the S&P 500 strategy, plug it into a 65-year back test, the S&P 500 over the last 65 years, and you have thousands of rolling 25-year periods of time. You average out those thousands of rolling 25-year periods of time, and that will give you your max illustrated rate based off of, again, how that 12% cap would have performed over the last 65 years. Now, we could talk about how flawed that is. Call option costs would have been different back then. Interest rates were different back then. They're different going forward. We could talk about that all day long. But, that was about as good as they could get at the time. Not taking into account the creativity that came later, which is a topic of my conversation. So that meant that, a 12% cap may have a max illustrated rate. Let's keep the numbers simple of 7%, right? That meant that a 10% cap may have a max illustrated rate of, say, like 6%. So again, a Ferrari is going to go a different speed than a Pinto, right? And this back testing took that into consideration. Actually, I know some products that have caps at that or less than that, and they're not Pintos. They're great products because it's also about expenses. But you get my analogy there. A Ferrari is not going to go the same speed as a Pinto and vice versa. So that logic was pretty sound there, right? Is, hey, if you have a call option budget that supports a 12% cap, then that call option budget may be able to provide 7% going forward. And let's assume that that call option budget was, say, in this example, let's say 5%. Let's keep it simple. Which, by the way, that's still pretty crazy, right? So the carrier's taking 5% and generating 7%. So that's an extra 40%. 7% is 40% on top of 5%. That's crazy. But that's something I have in another video I can send you, is just kind of that 40% linear assumption. Not going to go into right now. But here's what AG49 went on to further say. AG49 said, now, there are some more exotic strategies, some volatility controlled strategies, because they did exist prior to that, just not to the extent that they do now. So there are some exotic strategies out there. So how do we take these thousands, certainly hundreds at the time, scores at the time, how do we take these and how do we regulate what it is that they illustrate their products based off of? This XYZ volatility control strategy, this ABC volatility control strategy. What they said is, yes, the client may allocate their money to those other strategies, but the benchmark is the basic S&P 500 strategy that is in that same product, which means in English that those exotic strategies, the max illustrated rate is determined off of this. And that logic kind of holds true as well, right? Because the logic is, hey, if this product has a call option budget of 5%, whether it's this strategy, the other strategies, the fixed rate is 5% as well, which, by the way, the fixed rate many times is a good determinant of the call option budget. In normal times, it's gotten a little hairy here today. So the fixed rate is 5%, XYZ volatility control 5% call option budget, S&P 500 call option budget. The logic was pretty sound in that they said, if you have 5% generating 7% here, well, those other strategies as well, that 5%, we will assume a 7% max illustrated rate, even if they're not even in the S&P 500 cap strategy. Now, here's where carriers started to get creative, right? They started to create these bonus strategies. So here you have bonus. And and these strategies are good as well. I just want to make sure that I get, as I mentioned previously, I get calls every week of, hey, can you tell me why this product absolutely blows every single product out of the water over there, even illustrated at the same illustration rate? Well, it's not that product is bad. It's just that it dominates everybody else because there's illustration trickery going on. And let me explain that. So carriers started to come out with bonus strategies in addition to basic strategies. It's no coincidence that the basic strategy, S&P 500, has a really high cap many times with many of the products. Why is that? Because it is that determines what the rest of the strategies, for the most part, what the most of the strategies are illustrated at. So heck, why not have a 20% cap on that? Well, you could, but you have to back it with call options. But you get what I'm saying there. So these bonus strategies came out. So this new section of strategies came out. So maybe you have like 4 different bonus strategies that the client can choose from in that same product. One strategy may be the S&P 500 strategy. Now, it may be so that the S&P 500 bonus strategy only has like a 8% cap. And that 8% cap based off of AG 49, the back testing and all that, may provide a max illustrated rate of 5%. Now, why would the carrier have such a small cap up here with these bonus strategies? Well, what the carrier may have done was say, instead of taking a 5% call option budget, maybe a 4.5% call option budget. Why only 4.5% up here? Because maybe they take that extra 50 basis points and heck, also maybe charge the client a fee of, let's call it a 1% fee, right? So that extra 1.5%, maybe they make it so that the product has a bonus or a multiplier. And let's say that the multiplier is, say, 50%. So far so good, right? Based off the logic of AG 49, which all that we can do within this conversation is just assume that that logic is sound, although in a different forum we could shoot holes in that all day long. So far so good, right? Well, based off the last 65 years, 5%, then 50% on top of that. Basically, that policy is illustrating 5% plus an extra 2.5%, 7.5%. You know, some could say that's crazy, but so far the logic holds true. Where the logic goes a little bit sideways is where you have those exotic strategies. So you have ABC volatility control, XYZ volatility control that are also within that bonus category. So they get that bonus that we're talking about, right? What AG 49 says, which is a flaw, in my opinion, is, so what these strategies are illustrated at, which you and I both agree based off logic, is determined by a 4.5% call option budget. Well, what AG 49 says is because of the exotic nature of these strategies, the max illustrated rate is determined off of the basic S&P 500 65-year backtest of 7%, right? So this is where the logic starts to fall apart, and you're able to generate 7% in the illustration, even though, this logic here is right, the 8%, but AG 49 said, the S&P 500, basically if there's an S&P 500, you have to use that. But otherwise, you have to use the basic S&P 500 strategy to determine. So here is what you have effectively. What you have effectively is you are illustrating a call option budget, 5%. You're assuming that that's 5%, which generates 7%. Then on top of it, you're double dipping. You're taking that 50%. You're illustrating this strategy at 10.5% effectively. What that is doing is it is taking those two runners, saying this runner sprints really fast at the first, this runner sprints really fast at the end, and combining them as if they're one runner running a 3-minute mile. These illustrations that I see, unless I go into a 20-minute dissertation as I'm doing now, people don't understand why it is that there are various products absolutely blowing everybody out of the water. And that's really what it is. Now, we can get into the argument all day long, but this strategy here is so great because it's this investment bank that's world renowned, and that should easily be able to do 7% because that strategy is so, that's mental gymnastics that you will always have, right? But holding true to the logic of AG 49, that is some of the trickery that is taking place out there today.